Hello, everybody. Off we go to chapter 4, dealing with elasticities of demand and supply. Demand and supply. Okay, so let's just get rolling here. Oops. Okay, so what do we look at in this section? There we go. Okay, we look at the so-called price elasticity of demand. And we can look at it in two different ways. One, we can calculate the effect of changes in price on quantity demanded, and the other way we can look at it is the effect on total revenues, either for a company or the industry as a whole, from changes in prices. And we have two different price elasticity ranges. We have the elastic range, we have the inelastic range, and we have the so-called unitary elastic range. So with in the inelastic range, price and total revenue move directly with each other, whereas with in the elastic range, price and total revenues move inversely with each other. Okay, then we look at some factors that affect the elasticity of demand. So we look at the existence of substitutes in the market, that substitute products. We look at the portion of total income that gets spent on the product. So if you spend a very small portion of your income on a product, the elasticity of that product tends to be price inelastic. Whereas if you spend a large portion of your income on a product, it tends to be more price elastic. And then we look at the amount of time we have to adjust our consumption patterns to changes in prices. If we have a long time to change our consumption pattern, then price elasticity of demand tends to be more elastic. Whereas if we don't have much time to change our consumption of a product, then the demand tends to be price inelastic. Okay, and then we move on. Then we move on to the concept of price elasticity of supply, and it's similar to the concept of price elasticity of demand. We look at the effect of price changes on total quantity supplied by the market, and we also have we look at the impact of substitute products and complementary products and changes in income on our demands for products as prices change. And okay, and then I kind of went backwards there, sorry. And we have 4 factors affecting the price elasticity of supply. We have the amount of time period we have to adjust, or there's the length of time period that producers have to adjust their supply. If they have a long time to adjust their supply, then supply tends to be price elastic, and if they don't have much time to adjust their supply, then the supply tends to be price inelastic. And then we have the effect of the availability of raw materials, the effect of production complexity, and whether or not there's excess capacity or surplus inventories in the industry. And then the final section that I'm going to address, it's not really on the slide here, but I have some tips that I think may help us understand how some of these concepts work. We know that these concepts, I mean, if they're new to you, there's a certain amount of complexity to them, and it's easy to get confused on how elasticities work and whatnot, and I think there's some tips we can use to kind of keep things straight, but anyways, we'll save that for the end. Even though we'll visit them through the chapter, we'll save my summary to the end. Okay, so off we go to price elasticity of demand, and you know the book uses a notation EP. Personally, you know, sometimes I just change stuff. Personally, the way I write it, I call it price elasticity of demand. I just changed the notation a little bit to make it a little bit more easier for me to remember what the symbols mean. Anyways, so way back in chapter 3, we looked at how price changes resulted in movements along the supply and demand curves and changes in supply and demand, which were shifts, the horizontal shifts of those curves. And then, of course, chapter 4 here deals with the so-called elasticities of these curves. Okay, so the concept of price elasticity in economics, or just the concept of elasticity in economics, whether we're talking about demand or supply, refers to the quantity, sort of the rate of change in the quantity demanded or supplied due to a change in the price. And this rate of change, it's not the ordinary sense of the slope of the line, but this is economics, so economists have a special way to calculate the slope. It's a percentage change, but of course it's made according to the economic formula, which is a little bit different than we find in the rest of life. But anyways, that's economics. Okay, so we're looking at the price elasticity of demand, and here's our formula. The price elasticity of demand is the percentage change in quantity demanded divided by the percentage change in price. And here's a little summary down here: percentage change in quantity demanded divided by the percentage change in the price of that product. And as we mentioned before, economists calculate the percentage change in both the numerator and the denominator a little bit differently than we do in every other aspect of life. In the formulas in both the numerator and the denominator, we use the average change rather than the beginning point, or we use the average of the beginning and end points rather than simply the beginning point. So it's a bit of a different calculation, but there's a reason for that, and we'll see why in a minute. Okay, so the authors have given us a bit of a sample of how this price elasticity of demand works. So our product is price of oil. It must be barrels of oil. So if the price of a barrel of oil increases by 10%, what happens to the quantity demanded? And I think this is actually based on studies at some point in time, although it could very well have changed by now. But anyways, the point is, as the price of oil increases, here's our demand curve for oil. As the price increases, here's P1, and here's P2. Of course, according to the law of demand, if our price increases, then our quantity demanded has to decrease. There's Q1 and there's Q2. So price goes up, quantity demanded goes down. But we see that the quantity demanded declines by a smaller amount than the percentage increase in price. The price goes up 10%, and the amount that we demand only declines by 1%. So this is going to be an example of price inelasticity. Anyways, so by convention in economics, we quote the price elasticities. We quote price elasticities of demand and price elasticities of supply on an absolute value basis. So in our example in that last little diagram, we had price elasticity demand for oil. So price went up 10%. Oh my goodness, it's not working. Oh my goodness. Oh, I hate this. It goes up 10%, and the quantity of oil demanded declines by 1%. But the convention in economics is to quote these elasticities on an absolute value basis. So we just say that the price elasticity of demand is 0.1 rather than negative 0.1. And as we're going to find it in a minute here, that if the price elasticity of demand is less than 1, that's inelastic. Okay, so from now on, we're just going to drop the negative sign in these calculations. Okay, so now we come to the full-blown equation for price elasticity of demand, and it looks like a horrifyingly complex equation, but it really isn't. So price elasticity of demand equals the here's the summary version. It's the percentage change in quantity. It's percentage change in quantity divided by the percentage change in price. And as we mentioned before, in the denominators of these two terms, we use the average of the beginning and ending term rather than the beginning term the way we do in normal percentage calculations. So when we want to measure the percentage change in price, and the percentage change in quantity demanded due to that change in price. But the percentage change is just slightly different because we use the average of the change in quantity, and we use the average of the two prices, beginning and ending price, rather than simply the beginning price. So just to contrast this with an ordinary percentage calculation. So in ordinary math, the way we do things in every other aspect of life, if we have the number 2 and we increase that to number 3, then we see that that's a 50% increase because we have ending value minus the beginning value over the beginning value, which is obviously 1 over 2, which is obviously 50%. And then, of course, if we went in the other direction, if we decline from 3 to 2, and we calculated the percentage change, we would get ending value of 2 minus 3 over the beginning value of 3 equals minus 1 over 3 equals minus 33%. So we can see that when we change by a unit of 1 from 2 to 3 or from 3 to 2, the percentage change is different. So the reason economists have come up with this special measure of calculating percentages for elasticities is that the percentage change will be the same whether we increase our price or decrease our price, rather than having this difference the way we do with ordinary calculation. So the way the economists would calculate this change would be they would use the average value. So we'd go 3 minus 2 over the average is going to be 2.5. The average of the beginning and the ending value is going to be after 2.5. So we're going to get 1 over 2.5, and that equals 40%. 40%. Anyways, and so whether our price goes up or whether our price goes down, we're going to have the same price elasticity figure of 40%, or 0.4, because I guess we quoted on a decimal basis. Okay, let's just move on. Okay, so when we're speaking about elasticities, and this is true whether we're speaking about elasticities of demand or the elasticities of supply, and we have these different flavors of elasticities of demand. We have price elasticity of demand, we have income elasticity of demand, and we have, I call it cross-price elasticity of demand, and we'll walk through all three of them today. So with each one of these types of each one of these types of elasticities, we have these three ranges. We have so-called elastic demand, we have inelastic demand, and we have so-called unitary elastic demand. So when we say that the price of a product is price elastic, it means for a given change in price, a given percentage change in price, there is a larger percentage change in quantity demanded. And so what this means is that, and so when we do our calculation, the result will give us a figure of greater than 1. So we increase our price by 100%, our decrease in quantity is 200%, or something to that effect. And so this means that quantity demanded is relatively responsive to changes in price. And then we also have inelastic demand, and inelastic demand simply means that when we change the price of the product by a given percentage, then the quantity demanded changes by a smaller percentage. So of course, we know from the law of demand that when price goes down, quantity demanded goes up. So if we have an inelastic product, when we decrease the price by 10%, the quantity demanded goes down by less than 10%. It only goes down by 5%. And so the quantity demanded is relatively unresponsive to price. And I should have drawn this diagram on the last slide, but I'm giving you a bit of a heads up here how these things work. When we have a relatively inelastic demand curve, when you have a relatively inelastic demand curve, the demand curve tends to have a fairly steep slope. Negative, yes, but steep. And when we have a relatively elastic demand curve, oh my goodness. When we have a relatively elastic demand curve, the slope of the demand curve is shallow. These are just some easy ways, well, we'll come to it later, but these are some easy ways to remember how these diagrams work. Okay, so we have elastic demand, change in price, a given percentage change in price results in a larger percentage change in quantity demanded, and inelastic demand, a given percentage change in price results in a smaller percentage change in quantity demanded. And of course we have unitary elastic demand, which is simply in the middle. So our numerical value is price elasticity of demand equals 1. Okay, and then we have a summary slide next. We have a summary slide next. Okay, so when we have elastic demand, percentage change in quantity exceeds the percentage change in price. Elastic, that means our demand curve is relatively flat. Inelastic demand, percentage change in quantity is less than percentage change in price. It means our demand curve is relatively steep. And then for unitary price elasticity, there's an exact offset. Percentage change in price is exactly offset by the percentage change in quantity. And so it means that our demand curve is sort of neutral. It's kind of drawn on a 45-degree angle. Okay, and then we have the numerical values for elastic. Price elasticity of demand has a value greater than 1. For inelastic demand, or numerical value is less than 1. And for unitary elasticity, price equals 1. Okay, then the next little section deals with these two theoretical extremes. With price elasticity of demand, we can have so-called perfectly inelastic demand. So this means, for drawing our diagrams, this means that our demand curve is vertical. There's our demand curve. So it means that no matter how we change the price, the quantity demanded will not change. So here's P1, here's quantity 1. The supplier jacks up the price up to P2. What happens to quantity demanded? Well, nothing. We still demand the same quantity regardless of the price. Why is that the case? Why is that the case? Well, we'll come to that right this very second here. So why is that the case? And it's because the product has no substitutes. So for example, a good example of this is if you if you are a diabetic and you need insulin to live, theory says it doesn't matter what the price of insulin is, you're going to pay the price. The price goes up 500%, you're still going to pay the price because you need that certain quantity of insulin to stay alive. So another example, so there's no substitute for insulin. It's kind of unique to that product. I'm not a diabetic, so I don't know that for sure, but that's their theory anyways. There's no substitute for insulin, therefore our demand for it is perfectly inelastic, or the demand for it by diabetic people is perfectly inelastic. So another good example is food to a starving person. So if you're starving, whether the price is P1, whether the price is P2, doesn't matter. You're still going to pay for that quantity of food regardless of the price because you need to survive. And then another good example is narcotics. If you are addicted to narcotics and you're a drug addict, you're a heroin addict, or you're a morphine addict, theory says it doesn't matter what the price is, whether the price of heroin is this, the price of heroin is that, you're still going to pay the price because you need it effectively to satisfy your craving, and so you'll pay the price, whatever it is, to get the quantity that you need. Okay. So when you have a perfectly inelastic product, it effectively means it has no substitutes. Okay, and then we come to perfectly elastic demand. So we're going to see that this means that the demand curve, when we're talking about perfect elastic demand, we mean the demand curve is horizontal. Personally, I don't like drawing these curves perfectly vertically or perfectly horizontally. I like to put a little bit of a slope on them. So it just helps remind me, well, it helps remind me how stuff works. But anyways, what this effectively says is, here's our price. Here's our price. It's actually better to use a slight, it's better to use a slight slope in these diagrams. So let's say here's P1 and there's Q1. And the price goes up to P2. So the price goes up to here. And that means Q2 drops to 0. So it means the market will not tolerate any increase in price. So in our perfectly elastic case here, if price is 1, you increase the price by even 1 penny. Here's Q1. If you increase the price by even 1 penny, the quantity demanded in theory drops to 0, Q2. And why is that? It's because the product has many substitutes. So I think I mentioned to you before, I don't drink soft drinks, not for any reason other than I just don't like them. I don't like the taste. But anyways. So in my mind, Coke and Pepsi are substitutes. So if Coke and Pepsi are the same price in the market, and Coke increases their price by 25 cents a can, then if people view Pepsi as substitutes, people are going, here's Coke increases its price by 25 cents a can. People are going to drop Coke like a hot potato and move into Pepsi because they view Pepsi as a perfect substitute for Coke. Anyways, that's kind of the extreme theory. Okay, so any increase in price kills the quantity demanded for that particular product. Okay, so any increase in price, here's P0, I don't know why they go P0, anyways, P1, P0, P1, increase the price by to 31, it kills the demand for your product. Here's Q1, here's Q2, oops, this is P2, this is P1. Okay, so there are some examples of this. If you've ever gone traveling overseas and you've bought foreign currency and you come back to Canada and you have some American money or some Mexican money and you want to cash it in, well, you can kind of imagine if, in many communities in Canada, In many older sections of some communities in Canada, we'll have banks on all four corners. So here we'll have the TD Bank, here we'll have Royal Bank, here we'll have Scotiabank, and here we'll have Bank Montreal. So if all these banks were quoting foreign currency exchange rates on their front window, and you're walking down the street and you saw that one bank was offering a worse rate than the other, let's say, if TD was offering a higher exchange or lower exchange rate than all the other banks, nobody would go to TD. Everyone would go to the other banks to get the best exchange rate. So if the price at TD is too high, their demand for foreign exchange in that particular day is going to drop. It's going to drop to zero. Anyways, it's kind of like a real life example of perfectly elastic or product with a perfectly elastic demand. Okay, so we mentioned at the onset of today that we have two ways of measuring price elasticity of demand. One, we can look at the effect of price changes on quantity demanded, and we've just looked at that. And the other way we can look at price elasticity of demand is by looking at the effect on revenues due to changes in prices. So that's what this next little section is, looking at the effect on total revenues. And when we speak of total revenues, it could be either the total revenues of a particular company, or it could be the total revenues of a particular industry. It could be either one. Okay, and so what we're going to anticipate here is, because we know we have these different ranges of price elasticity. We have elastic prices, we have inelastic prices, and we have unitary elastic prices. We can expect there to be some corresponding different effects on total revenue changes from prices or price changes. Okay, so in any business, total revenue is simply equal to price times quantity. Okay, and we know from the law of demand that we have an inverse relationship between price and quantity demanded. Here's our demand curve. So we know that if price goes up, our quantity demanded is going to decline, and we know that if price goes down, our quantity demanded is going to increase. But what we know, along the demand curve here, we have different sections of the demand curve. The top end of the curve is the, I was thinking about this earlier. It's counterintuitive to me, so I have to kind of think about it. The top end of the curve is the elastic section of the curve, and the bottom end of the curve is the inelastic section, and the center of the curve is the unitary elastic section. So what we're going to see here is that in the elastic section, price and total revenue are inversely related, and in the inelastic section, price and total revenue are directly related. And I'm going to try. I can't find my little mouse. There it is. It's a little dot. It's a little dot about the size of a pen, and then I have another screen that has a big marker, and the big marker distracts my attention. Okay. Okay, I'm going to go backwards here. Sorry, I'm going to go backwards here. Don't have a lot of room. So again, just as you mentioned before, with an elastic demand curve, the demand curve tends to be fairly flat. That's elastic. And with an inelastic curve, the demand curve tends to be inelastic. It tends to be fairly steep. And then unitary, we're just going to have it kind of neutral slope, unitary. Okay, so we want to know how this operates here. I don't know why I would go to. Okay, so with unitary elastic demand, price changes do not affect total revenue. So this is kind of a simple one. Price changes do not affect total revenue. So if price goes up, total revenue stays the same, total revenue stays the same, or if price goes down, total revenue stays flat. And the example from the book is bottled water, but it's just an example. It's just an example. The other extremes are more interesting. Okay, so when you have a demand curve showing positive price elasticity, then price changes and total revenue have an inverse relationship. So change in price and change in total revenue are inversely related. So when we look at these things, here's a demand curve. Here's a demand curve. So we're looking at elastic, so I'm going to have a fairly flat one. The total revenue, as we mentioned before, and as we kind of know intuitively, it equals price times quantity. So here's our demand curve, here's our quantity in the bottom, here's our price on top, here's P1, here's Q1. So the total revenue for this industry, when the price is P1, total revenue equals P1 times Q1. And of course, if the price goes up to P2 here, P2, and here's Q2, then total revenue will equal P2 times Q2. So what the demand curve effectively shows is the total revenue equals the area under the curve at a particular point. So when price is P1 and Q is Q1, this box, this area represents total revenue. And when the price changes to P2, this area here is total revenue. So a good way to visualize total revenue when we're using a demand curve is simply to imagine the size of the box underneath the demand curve. And so we can see from this little example, because we're using an elastic demand curve here, so we know that as price goes up, quantity has to go down. That's just our law of demand. But because we're using an elastic demand curve here, and we know that there's an inverse relationship between price changes and total revenue. So as price goes up, total revenue goes down. And we can see that visually because originally we were in P1 times Q1. So we can see that that box is relatively large. And then when the price goes up and we go over to P2 and Q2, we see that the area of the box underneath the curve has shrunk. And that's exactly what this little formula says. And then of course the same thing would happen if we went in reverse. If we started at P2 and we dropped to P1, as our price drops or quantity increases and total revenue increases. And so what we're gonna see here, and it's kind of an easy way to remember these things, sort of. The point of unitary elasticity is in the center, and the point of unitary elasticity, this point here, A equals point of maximum revenue. So that's the point of maximum revenue. So we have a minimum point up here and we have a minimum point down here. And in the elastic section, price and total revenues move inversely, and in the inelastic section down here, price and total revenues move directly with each other. So down in the inelastic section, as price goes up, so do total revenues. And in the elastic section, as price goes up, total revenues decline. And of course, the same thing happens in reverse when we cut prices. In the elastic section, as price goes down, total revenues also go down. Oops. Oh, did I get that backwards? I said there's an inverse relation. Oh no, sorry, I screwed this up. Oh no, that's right. Sorry, I was reading it wrong. As price declines, total revenue goes up, and in the inelastic section, as price declines, total revenue declines as well. Okay. We'll come back to that. So I just had a second thought there, but I was right the first time. Okay, so in the inelastic section, there we have a in the inelastic section, price. Oh my goodness, price and total revenue are directly related. So let's just draw a little diagram here. Here's our demand curve. The inelastic section of the demand curve is the bottom half. And remember, the total revenue equals price times Q. It's the size of the box. It's the size of the box underneath the curve. So if P1 is here, and Q1 is here, so originally we have Q1 times Q1. That's the size of our box. And if the price goes up, to P2, you know, it's a little bit hard to see on this hand-drawn diagram because in part I don't have very good handwriting. But we can see that when the price goes up to P2, and even though the quantity declines times Q2, this total revenue at point 2 is greater than total revenue at point 1. So this is price and total revenue are directly related with one another in the inelastic section of the demand curve. So you can see, you can kind of get the point here that the reason I'm drawing lots of these little diagrams is because, you know, I think most people find it easier to understand this stuff visually. And the nice thing about doing it visually is it's the right analysis. It's the right answer. You don't have to use math to get the right answer. We can understand these things correctly using these diagrams, and I guess that explains why these economists like to use little diagrams, just because they're easy to explain. Okay, so all we have here is we have a data table, and we're going to chart total revenue. We're going to chart total revenue here in a minute. So we've got price. Here's our y-axis. Here's our y-axis here. Oh, and I don't like. Anyways, here's our quantity. Here's our quantity here on the x-axis. Here's our total revenue, and they've done the elasticity calculations for us. So we know that when I call it price elasticity of demand is greater than 1, that's the elastic section. So all these elasticity calculations are greater than 1. At the point of unitary elasticity, price elasticity of demand equals 1, and in the inelastic section of the curve, the price elasticity of demand is less than 1, and of course these are all less than 1. So now we're going to plot these. We're going to plot this data on a little chart here. And so this is our demand curve. This is our demand curve. So here's our quantity on the bottom. Here's our price on the side. In this case, the product is cell phone minutes. And again, so just to give you a heads up on how to look at this thing, let me use red here. Here's our point. Here's our point of unitary elasticity. Elasticity. And that's the point of maximum total revenue. And then in the top section here, this is going to be the elastic section of the curve. The demand curve. And so we know that in this section, price and total revenue are inversely related. And in the bottom section of the curve, this is the inelastic section. And down here, price and total revenue are directly related. And again, you know, I've said this way too many times already, but the way to kind of understand this stuff is here's our point of maximum revenue. Maximum revenue. It's this P and this quantity. If we were to calculate the area underneath this curve, straight line I should say, but anyways, if we calculate the area is maximized at this particular point in this particular quantity. If we choose any other price that's higher than this price, and the quantity is going to decline, the area under the curve will shrink. As we go up, the area will shrink, and likewise in this section here, as price goes down, the area will shrink as well. So, okay, let's just keep on going. Oh, okay, so they've color-coded the section of the curve for us. Okay, so here we have the elastic section of the demand curve. And remember, again, this is a demand curve. We just have to be careful because we're going to look at a revenue curve here in a minute, and we need to keep these things straight. So this is the elastic section of the demand curve. This is the inelastic section of the demand curve. As prices go up in this section, total revenues decline. As prices go up in this section, total revenues increase. And as in this top section, as prices decline, total revenues increase. And as prices increase in this section, total revenue increases. And of course, in the very center section, when you change the price, nothing happens to total revenue. It just stays neutral. Okay. Okay, so now we have a plot. This is a total revenue curve. So on the bottom, you know, on the side here, on the y-axis, we have total revenue in billions of dollars per year. And on the bottom, we have quantity. This is a little bit counterintuitive to me that you would plot quantity on the bottom as opposed to price, but what the heck, they're plotting quantity. So we're going to see in a minute here that this diagram maps back to this diagram. That's why they're using quantity on the bottom, even though to me it's counterintuitive. They're using quantity on the bottom, on the x-axis in both these diagrams. Okay, so as our quantity increases, our total revenues go through a phase of increasing, and then after a point, our quantity increases, but our price is decreasing at the same time, and then our total revenues start declining And so we have this point of maximum revenues up here, which of course corresponds to our point of unitary elasticity. Okay, so they've color coded the elastic sections on this. Remember, this is a total revenue curve. This is a total revenue curve. So we have the elastic section. I don't know how to draw those brackets. This is the elastic section. And then we have the inelastic section. And then, of course, we have the point of unitary elasticity at the top. So we can see here, we can see indirectly that as price goes up, our quantity declines. And in the elastic section, price and total revenue move inversely. So as price goes up, total revenue declines. It declines up at the top here. Anyways, let's just keep on moving here. Okay, so we've mapped these two curves beside each other. So this is our demand curve. This is a demand curve. And this is our total revenue curve. Quantity, same quantity on the bottom, but on the y-axis over on the demand curve, we have the price of the product, and on the y-axis on the total revenue curve, we have total revenues. So in the elastic section of the curve, price and total revenue are inversely related. So as price goes up, total revenues. I don't know, it's not working here. In the inelastic section, they're directly related. So in the inelastic section, as price goes up, total revenues also go up. So when the price is 40 cents, here's the total revenue. As price goes from 40 up to 60, our total revenues increase. And in the elastic section, price and total revenue are inversely related. So as price goes up, total revenues decline. Well, they increase at a lower rate, I guess that's what's happening here. And total revenues are maximized at the point of unitary elasticity, so that's the center of the demand curve. As price goes up, total revenues, they decline, and as price comes down, I see how it works. So as price comes down, total revenue is up. Total revenue goes up. So that's what this is representing here. As price goes down, total revenue goes up in this little section here. The total revenue curve, to me, it's just a kind of a counterintuitive animal. I find it easier to understand the thing through the demand curve rather than mapping the two beside each other. Anyways, okay, so the next little section is simply a summary of what we've just seen. And I wish I should have fixed this slide because it should say pricing. This increase should be over here. So what do we know? In the inelastic section of the curve, as the price increases, we have an inverse relationship between price and total revenue. So here's price, here's total revenue. So as in the inelastic section of the curve, as prices increase, total revenue in the inelastic section of the curve, price and total revenue are directly related. So as price increases, my goodness, total revenue, as price increases, total revenue, I've got it mixed up here. As price, oh my goodness, I can't read this chart. Price increase, because I think there's a mistake. As price increase, Oh, I see. As price increase. Okay, as price increase. This is the price increase column. Total revenue increases. That's right. They're directly related. And as price decrease, total revenue is going to decrease. And in the elastic section, prices and total revenues are inversely related. So a price increase results in a total revenue decrease, and a price decrease results in a total revenue increase. And of course, for unitary elasticity, price changes have no effect on total revenue. Anyways, I just can't understand other people's charts, but and I should fix this. I just have a note. Fix slide. Okay. So, what are some factors that affect the price elasticity of demand? So, as we mentioned before, whether or not there are substitutes available. So, the greater the number of substitutes for a product, the more elastic the demand is going to be. So, if we say that Coke and Pepsi are substitutes, an increase in the price of Coke will result in if the price elasticity of demand for Coke is elastic, a increase in the price of Coke will result in a large decrease in the quantity demanded. Why? Because we have Pepsi available as a substitute. And if the product does not have any substitutes, then the demand will be relatively inelastic. That's insulin, addictive narcotics. Okay, share budget. So if we have a product that consumes a very small portion of our budget, then the product tends to be relatively price inelastic. And if you have a product that consumes a relatively large portion of our budget, then the price tends to be relatively elastic. So the classic example is salt. So, table salt is very inexpensive. So even if the price of a box of salt, even if it went from $3 up to $12, because we tend to consume very little quantities of salt, the demand curve will be relatively steep. So even a large price increase probably won't decrease the quantity demanded by very much, because it's the demand price elasticity of demand for salt tends to be inelastic, because we're only spending $12 a year or $10 a year or $3 a year, because that big box of salt lasts a long time. Even a small box of salt lasts a long time for most people. Okay, and then we have the length of the adjustment period. So if prices increase, how much time do we have to adjust our consumption pattern? So if we have a short time, the demand curve will be relatively steep. It will be relatively inelastic. And if we have a relatively larger amount of time to adjust our consumption pattern, then the demand curve will be relatively elastic. This is a long time. And that's what the rest of this little section goes through. So we can kind of understand this fairly readily. I mean, imagine that the price of electricity, maybe this is an example from the book, imagine that the price of electricity increases very rapidly. In the short run, we're stuck with our light bulbs, we're stuck with our appliances, we're kind of stuck, if we have electric heat, we're stuck with our heating system. So if the price changes, if the price goes up considerably in the short run, then our quantity demanded is not going to decline very much. But if we have a long time to adjust our consumption pattern, then that change in the price of electricity from P1 to P2, as P1 to P2, our quantity demanded for electricity will probably change quite considerably. There's quantity 1, there's quantity 2, because we can change our light bulbs from incandescent to fluorescent or LED. We can change our heating system from electricity to natural gas or wood or solar or something like that. So we can shift, we can change our consumption patterns easier in the long run than in the short run. Okay, so here's our short run demand curve. Don't have a lot of time to switch, so big price change, P2, small change in quantity, Q2. But as we have more time to change our consumption patterns, the demand curve will get relatively flatter, and we can substitute out of the product for substitute products. Okay, so the next little section deals with the so-called, the book calls it cross elasticity of demand. I call it cross price elasticity of demand because it's still dealing with prices, which is a little bit different than income, which we're going to see very shortly. But anyways, cross price elasticity of demand simply means the percentage change in the quantity demanded of one product due to a price change in a different product. For a different product. So if the price of a if the price of another product increases a lot, if there's a larger increase, large increase, and the quantity that of the other product that we consume decreases only a small amount, then it's going to be relatively inelastic. And if the change in price of another product increases a lot and the quantity we consume of this other product decreases a large amount, then it's relatively elastic. So we've got the formula here. So let's look at the formula. Okay, so if the percentage change in product Y results in a change in the quantity demanded of product X, or to a relatively large change in the quantity demanded of product X, then the cross price elasticity of demand is positive. So I'm just going to have some examples here in just a minute. Okay, so oh, sorry, I'm on the wrong slide here. Okay, so I have an example here. So again, we have gas stations. We have gas station number A, and we have gas station number B, and they're on opposite corners of the same street, B. So if gas station number A increases its price of gas, so the starting point is all the gas is $1.20 a liter at both gas stations, at A and B. And then gas station number A increases its price of gas to $1.30 a liter. Well, most gasoline is a substitute for other gasoline. So if the price of gasoline at gas station A increases, then the quantity of gasoline demanded at gas station B will probably increase. Why? Because the gasoline at the two gas stations are substitutes for one another, and an increase in price at A results in a big decrease in quantity at gas station A, because everyone's going to drive across the street where gas is still $1.20 a liter. So the gasoline at competing gas stations in the same neighborhood probably has a high cross-price elasticity of demand because they're substitutes. And then another example is my Coke and Pepsi. So same kind of thing. If you think that Coke and Pepsi are good substitutes for one another, if the price of a Pepsi goes up, then the quantity demanded of Coke will probably go up, because the quantity demanded of Pepsi is probably going to go down, because people are going to switch out of the more expensive product to the less expensive, because we view them as substitutes. Okay, and then we also have the concept of complementary products. So these are products that we use in conjunction with one another. So this works the exact opposite way. If the price of one good increases in price, then the quantity of that good, the quantity demanded of that good will decline, and the quantity of a complementary good will also decline. So we have price of good A goes up, so quantity of good A goes down, and quantity of good B also declines. And of course, the other way around, if the price of A goes down, the quantity of A demanded goes up, and the quantity of B also goes up. So, you know, a good example of this is probably boats, recreational boats, and life preservers. Assuming you need to have life preservers in every boat. So if the price of boats, oh my goodness, sorry, if the price of boats declines, then the quantity of boats demanded will go up, and the quantity of life preservers demanded will also go up. And likewise, if the price of boats go up, let's say the government imposes some kind of a tax on recreational vehicles, and boats get hit by a heavy tax, the price of boats go up, quantity of boats demanded will decline, and likewise the quantity of life preservers will also decline. Why? Because boats and life preservers are complementary goods. We consume them together. Okay, so in this case, our cross-price elasticity of demand is going to be negative, and then of course we're going to have a neutral effect where the change in the price of one good, of one product, has no impact on the quantity demanded of the other product. And so there, you know, most products in our consumer universe fall into this situation. Oh, I see I'm off. So a good example is the price of popcorn and the quantity demanded of lawnmowers. Well, popcorn and lawnmowers, they're neither substitutes nor complements. So the price of popcorn, changes in the price of popcorn will not affect the quantity demanded of lawnmowers. It's just unrelated. They're unrelated products, though. Anyways, okay. So the next final section dealing with price elasticity is final section dealing with price elasticity deals with income elasticity of demand. So how does our quantity demanded of a particular product change as our income changes? And as we saw earlier, back in last chapter, I think, chapter 3, we had the concept of normal goods and inferior goods. And so we have this different impact. So with normal goods, normal products, as our income increases, our quantity demanded is likely to increase, and with so-called inferior goods. So a good example is vacations. As our income increases, our quantity demanded of vacations increase. So we have positive price elasticity, and then we also have inferior goods. So as our income increases, our quantity demanded of the inferior goods will move inversely. It'll decrease. And so good examples of this are used vehicles. As our income goes up, we tend to buy better vehicles. Craft dinner, living at home with your parents. As your income comes up, you're probably going to shift out of living with your parents and getting your own apartment. Okay. So let's just move on here. I think there's a little summary slide here. Oh my goodness, where's my little mouse? It's just hard to find. It's just a dot. Okay. So here's our formula for income elasticity of demand. So we have a percentage change in income. How does our percentage change in the quantity demanded change? Does it increase? If it increases, we have a normal good, and if it quantity demanded decreases, then we have an inferior good. Okay, forgot about that slide. Okay, and then we have a small summary slide here. When we're calculating price elasticities, we're referring to changes along the demand curve, and when we're talking about income elasticity of demand, when our income changes, here's our original demand curve here, demand curve 1, that's at income 1, and if with a normal good, as income goes up, our demand goes up, and so that means it's the demand curve itself that shifts, demand 2. As our income goes up, the whole demand curve shifts versus price elasticity. So the concept of elasticity is a little bit different because one deals with shifting curve, and the other is a movement along the curve. Okay, so the final section of Chapter 4 deals with the price elasticity of supply, and so the concepts are analogous to the concepts of price elasticity of demand, but of course it's applied to the supply curve rather than the demand curve. So we have a supply curve. The supply curve, as we know, has a positive slope to it. So as prices increase, the quantity supplied by producers is also going to increase. So we're going to have the same three ranges along the supply curve. We're going to have elastic supply, inelastic supply, and then unitary supply as well. Okay, and then we use the same kind of elasticity calculation formula that we use for demand. We have percentage change in quantity supplied for a percentage change in price, and we use those same formulas. It's the average of the price change in the denominator, and it's the average of the quantity in the numerator, in the denominator of the numerator, if you want to say it that way, rather than a regular percentage calculation. It's just that funny economics formula for percentage change. Okay, so we have these three ranges of supply elasticity. We have so-called perfectly elastic supply. So perfectly elastic supply is horizontal, and so it means that, again, I like to draw these curves with a very slight slope on them. So if the price increases by a small amount, P1 to P2, if the price increases by a small amount, Q1, and there's Q2, if the price increases by a little bit when the supply curve is elastic, producers want to greatly increase their supply. So the percentage change in quantity offsets or complements the percentage change in price. And when we have inelastic curves, supply curves, the supply curve is, in the case of a perfectly inelastic supply curve, it's going to be perpendicular, it's going to be vertical. And of course, when we're talking about less than perfectly inelastic supply, it's just very steep. Here's the supply curve, here's the supply curve. It's just very steep. Oh, sorry, I got the demand curves there. I got them mixed up. So the perfectly inelastic supply curve is vertical. It's vertical, and merely a inelastic supply curve is going to be steep. So a percentage change in price, so the price goes up by a significant amount. Yes, the price goes up, quantity has to go up, Q1, Q2, but we can see that the percentage change in quantity increases by a relatively small amount compared to the percentage change in price. And that's an inelastic supply curve. Okay, and what are some factors that affect the steepness of the supply curve? Because it's the steepness of the supply curve that tells us whether the elasticity of supply is elastic or inelastic. So first factor is the length of time that producers have to adjust their production. So in the short run, the supply curve tends to be fairly steep, short run. And in the long run, the supply curve tends to be fairly flat. Why? Because the more time producers have to adjust to the price change, the more time they have to change their productive capacity or to use unused capacity, buy additional raw materials, buy additional inputs, and so on. So the more time the company has to adjust its supply, the flatter the supply curve will be. Okay, and then we have some other factors here. So availability of raw materials. So we can imagine ourselves, we produce some product, but we don't have a lot of inventory of raw material inventory on hand. So even though in the short run, even though the price may increase significantly in the short run from P1 to P2, we really can't increase our supply very significantly because we don't have a lot of raw materials on hand. So, okay, and likewise with so-called complexity of production. So even if prices increase significantly in the short run, if we can't change our production because we can't get all the other materials that we need for production. So in point number two here, we're talking about raw materials, but we have other factors of production besides raw materials. We have labor, we have a capital. It may be that yes, prices go up, but we have to buy additional equipment. And equipment, it can take a long time for equipment to get produced. It can take, several years for some pieces of equipment to get produced if they're customized pieces of equipment. Especially in the oil refining industry, some of the equipment there's a long lead time on some pieces of equipment. So if it takes a long time for equipment to get manufactured, the supply curve is going to be fairly steep in the short run. And then if we have excess capacity, then our supply curve is probably going to be fairly flat because we can use that extra capacity very shortly. But if we don't have excess capacity, well, we're back to situation 2 here. We don't have excess capacity. We can't quickly just turn on a switch and increase our supply, and so the supply curve will be relatively inelastic, so relatively steep. Okay, so just as with demand, we have these two extremes of elasticity with supply. We have a so-called perfectly inelastic curve. So regardless of so with a perfectly inelastic supply curve, regardless of how much prices increase, the quantity supplied does not change. And then of course at the other extreme we have our perfectly and then if at the other extreme we have a perfectly elastic supply curve. So any change in price, so if our price increases by 1 cent, then suppliers are going to want to flood the market, and if prices decrease by 1 cent, then suppliers are going to kill the quantity supplied. So here's Q1, Q2 equals Q1 minus 1 cent. With a perfectly elastic supply curve, if the price declines by 1 cent, then suppliers are going to pull their product from the market, and Q will simply disappear. I mean, remember, these are theoretical extremes, but okay, and then I think we kind of looked at this one already, but it's the effect of the length of the adjustment period on the shape of the supply curve. So in the short run, if prices go up and we have only a short period of time to adjust, and the supply curve is going to be relatively inelastic. And if we have more time to adjust, if suppliers have more time to adjust, then the steepness of the supply curve will flatten, and they can respond to changes in the supply curve. They can adjust to changes in supply. Okay, I think that's the end of this chapter 4. Oh, okay, so this just shows the same thing. The more adjustment time producers have, the flatter the supply curve comes over time. So here's T1, here's T2, and here's T3. So the more adjustment period you have, the more the flatter the supply curve. Okay, so I mentioned at the beginning that I have some summary slides that might help you get some of this supply and demand curve elasticities. So let me just find it here. Okay, so so this is one thing that I was going to bring to your attention to help you understand how elasticities work. When you speak of elasticities, we can kind of use it in two senses. We can either refer to elasticities in an absolute sense, and so this is the sense that the book was using. When you calculate the price elasticity of demand, if the value is 1, that's oh, I got a spelling mistake there. that's a unitary elasticity. Where's my thing here? Oh my goodness, spelling. And if the value is greater than 1, then we have positive price. We have price elasticity. If the value was between 0 and 1, then we have inelasticity. And we have these two extremes. We have perfect elasticity at the top end, at one end, and perfect inelasticity at the other end. And so I've used this shaded line to kind of represent this gradation between these two extremes. So the way the book has presented this is in terms of absolute values of the figure that comes out of the price elasticity of demand calculation. However, we also kind of use elasticity in kind of a relative sense. And so if our starting point is up here, and if we have a product that is elastic, and price changes, it can become relatively more inelastic or absolutely less elastic. So I mean, we don't have to calculate these figures all the time. We can just kind of speak in a relative sense. So a good product can become, if you're starting at this point, at this end of the extreme here, at this end of the range here, and we move in this direction here, we can become relatively more elastic, or we can also say the same thing, we become relatively less inelastic, or if we start at the elastic end and we move in this direction, we can become less elastic or relatively more inelastic. It's just speaking relatively. Okay, then another thing I was just going to point out, and you've probably picked this up in your own already, but when we're talking about these curves, to me, it's easy to remember. It's easy to remember which curve is elastic and which curve is inelastic, because the inelastic curves, whether it's a demand curve or supply curve, they tend to have very steep slopes. Very steep slopes. And to me, these steep slopes, it looks like the letter I. And I kind of stands for inelastic. And when the curve is elastic, the curves tend to be relatively flat. And so the demand curve has a very shallow slope, and the supply curve tends to have a very shallow slope. And to me, these lines, they kind of look like compressed E's. It's like an E, that's a capital E that's been flattened. And so we kind of get a horizontal line, which has no positive slope. But anyways, it seems to me that the steep sloped curves look like the letter I, and the shallow curves look like a compressed E, standing for elastic, whereas the I stands for inelastic. Okay, and then this final section here, and I have to admit, personally I find this counterintuitive, but I have to admit it might not have any impact on you because maybe you don't have any sense of it. But when drawing the demand curve, here's our point of unitary elasticity in the center, and the elastic sections at the top, and the inelastic sections at the bottom. I mean, I want to kind of correlate this to the steepness of the curves, but we really can't. Anyways, when we're calculating the price elasticity of demand using total revenue, here's our point of maximum revenue. This is our price of maximum revenue. And as price comes down during the elastic section, total revenue, as price comes down, total revenue increases. As price comes down, total revenue increases as we move down. And in the inelastic section, price and total revenue move directly. So as price goes up, total revenue also goes up, and vice versa. Anyways, that's it for chapter 4, and then we'll move on. That's it for chapter 4. Okay. Talk to you later.